I was the kid who was organizing breath holding competitions in the schoolyard, in the first grade. We'd hyperventilate and squeeze each other, and if you were lucky, you passed out. I had a real a thing for breathing from very, very young, starting in kindergarten. I was raised in the Catholic school. One day the priest came around and was talking about in the Bible Genesis and how God took the dust of the earth and formed the body of man and breathed into the nostrils of man the breath of life. And the little child in me got so excited about that. I was like, what? Why isn't everybody excited? It's like God is breathing into us. Like, whoa. We weren't supposed to use the boat, while the parents were away, but us little hooligans, I knew how to get the engine started, a couple of the other kids. And so we were having turns skiing, and I got knocked unconscious in the water. And I was floating face down, and the other kids in the boat thought I was pretending and playing games. And it took a while before they dragged me back into the boat. And just by sheer luck, a miracle, when they were pulling me over the edge of the boat, I can remember my back scraping, and then I started breathing. And when I had that realization I was breathing, something in me relaxed, and everything opened up, and the breath started pouring into me. And I guess you could say I discovered the ecstatic nature of the breath, because I wasn't breathing little bubbles of air, molecules of air. I was breathing bubbles of light, and they were bursting everywhere in me. It was orgasmic, it was ecstatic, and I had this full body experience of breathing. When you're in the womb, all the energy you get comes through the umbilical cord, and you don't have to do anything. But when you're born, all these systems come online at the same time. And that first breath, we don't have a chance to just play with our breath and get used to it. And no, you gotta breathe or die. And that first breath is so painful. It's like fire. And so the next breath ain't gonna be as big. And then every emotional shock, every physical shock, every psychological trauma puts an inhibition on our breathing. The first thing that breaks down isn't your muscles, it's your breathing. If you can only catch your breath and keep your breath, you can keep going. And it got to be more and more of a priority. I was a deep sea diver in the military. I was mixing gases, practicing breath holding. I started leaning in the Eastern direction, which, I'm in the Western world, started getting interested in yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and the Eastern studies, because that wasn't being taught. Now I've been with 73 countries, and I've had my hands on probably 300,000 people over the last 50 years. Breathing is the most powerful biological urge we have. If you can relax in the presence of that, relaxing into everything else is easy. In the cycle of breath, fear lives up at the top of the inhale. So it's like, and the breath gets jammed up there. And so those people, you need to relax, exhale, come down. Somebody who's angry is down the bottom of the exhale. Yeah, and you're going, hey, lighten up. So even with emotions, you can see which way the person is out of balance.
Good morning, Dan. It's an honor to have you here at Born SuperHuman. Really excited to learn so much about breath work and the dynamic impact, probably more than anybody out there, that changes our daily life second by second. But before we get into that, one of the things that I always love to find out, tell us about you as a young boy. What was your life? What was your passion? What was your dream at that time? And did you ever think you would get into this dynamic impact of breath work?
Well, I was the kid who was organizing breath holding competitions in the schoolyard, in the first grade. And we'd hyperventilate and squeeze each other, and if you were lucky, you passed out. I had a real a thing for breathing from very, very young, starting in kindergarten. I was raised in the Catholic school, and one day the priest came around and was talking about the first book in the Bible, Genesis, and how God took the dust of the earth and formed the body of man and breathed into the nostrils of man the breath of life. And the little child in me got so excited about that. I was like, what, why isn't everybody excited? It's like God is breathing into us. Like, whoa. And I have vague memories of the priest trying to push my shoulders, get me down into my chair, and the nun tapping me on my head, trying to calm me down. I guess I got a little too animated. And but I can't tell you how many times I got the wind knocked out of me, and I had near drowning experiences, and in sports and climbing trees, and so it was like, I don't know, the life just kept sticking my nose in the breath. And my first job was as an X-ray technician. I was a deep sea diver in the military. I was mixing gases, practicing breath holding. And so it never really had a beginning. It just kept displacing everything else in my life until now. I've been with 73 countries, and I've had my hands on probably 300,000 people over the last 50 years. So it's like, it's a mission. It's a born mission, you know?
Well, I know you've been teaching, what, for 53 years, something like that along there. But when you were this young child discovering the power of breathing into the nostrils and everything, it wasn't a profession. There wasn't something there at that point that was a legitimate career, or am I wrong?
Yeah, no, not at all. Um, whether I was getting punched in the stomach or trying to hold my breath a little too long in between waves in the ocean, I just got more and more focused on the breathing, and I don't wasn't really a conscious choice. Um, so, trying to keep up when you're running and realizing, wow, the first thing that breaks down isn't your muscles, it's your breathing. If you can only catch your breath and keep your breath, you can keep going. So it seemed like my breathing was the first thing to break down, and it got to be more and more of a priority.
I'd love to explore just a little bit more. You said you had a number of near-death experiences with drowning, and then go in and and maybe it was during that time, you then go and join the Navy as a diver, having had near-death drowning experiences. Can you explain that? Because that's gonna be fascinating. Most people would run away from a fear. You embraced it.
Yeah, well, the first time we were water skiing, us kids. We weren't supposed to use the boat, while the parents were away, but us little hooligans, I knew how to get the engine started, a couple of the other kids. And so we were having turns skiing. Actually, it was on a round disc. We used to use this round plywood tabletop. It was kind of fun to spin around. And I fell in front of it, and the back of the I got hit in the back of the head and got knocked unconscious in the water. And I was floating face down, and the other kids in the boat thought I was pretending and playing games, and it took a while before they dragged me back into the boat, and just by sheer luck, a miracle, when they were pulling me over the edge of the boat, I can remember my back scraping, and then I started breathing. And then I went for 2 days. I was shaking, I was nervous, I was, wow, I mean, but I didn't wanna tell my parents. I was more worried about getting caught he's stealing the boat than I was trying to recover from this this near death experience. And so it took me a couple of days, but I kind of managed, but something in me, when I first started breathing again was, aha, it made me twice as interested and twice as, focused on breathing after that. Mhm.
Yeah, I was shooting a movie down in South Africa, and I was in a submarine, and it was one of these open submarines because we're doing all the shark attacks and stuff. And we hit the bottom of the ocean, and they start shaking the submarine to make it look like we're being attacked. So I'm throwing my arms everywhere. Well, my breathing apparatus cut out, and I had a full face mask. And the only opening, because I was on the bottom, was my partner who was on the other side. And I was trying to shake him to say, I can't breathe. We need to get out. And the safety divers were far away thinking I'm doing this incredible acting. I wasn't acting, I was drowning. And by the time he realized, he had to put his hand outside, but I actually had to pull his mask off his face a little bit to get the attention. This is serious. And by the time I got to the surface, I thought I was going to drown. It was there. And the director comes over and goes, so how are you feeling? I said, man, that was bad. And he goes, okay, well, let's go down and do it again. having to face that fear, and then I formed a form of, claustrophobia at that point. But fascinating. What did you learn from diving itself? Because obviously that goes into a very specific neurological, physiological state.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't know much. I was, when I was first went to in deep sea diving school in the military, it was 1972, and then into 73, a year of training. And then after that, I was assigned in different ships and different projects and stuff. Um, but yeah, during the training, um, had a point where I had an equipment failure, and and we I had to cut myself loose. The other guy I was with, we were tied together with a buddy, and I was down about 150 feet on scuba, and I was Kirby Morgan band mask at the time, and and we have a signal, I got no air, and I pulled him. We were tied together. I pulled him over to me, and I got in his face, and and my training kicked in. I checked this, I checked that, I checked. Nothing was working, so time to buddy breathe, and we had been trained to buddy breathe. And so I wanted to take that regulator out of his mouth so bad. He was looking at me like a puppy dog. "What's the problem?" I go, "I got no air, I got no air." And then finally he kind of let loose because you're not supposed to take it. You got to give it to the other person. He finally took it out of his mouth, and I didn't even get it in mine, and he pulled it back. So at that point, I thought, okay, man, this guy's not going to help me. So I cut myself loose, and I headed for the bottom. And I was trying to don't get ahead of my bubbles, he's exhaling as you go up, don't get ahead of the bubble. And I think I exhaled too much, and I'm squeezing, and I can't get any more air out, and the pressure to try to breathe in was getting stronger and stronger, and I almost formed the thought that I wasn't gonna make it. It didn't quite form, and instead, I saw the silhouette at the bottom of the boat. And the thought immediately became, "Oh," it was like a surprise, "I'm going to make it." And then just then I blacked out. And, and I came to, there was a beautiful black guy, Charles W. Brooks. I was in a surreal place. I didn't have a light experience or looking at my body from above or anything like that. Um, but I had this dream of this giant black lip sucking my face like, "Claw, claw, claw, claw." And I'm just like in a weird surreal dream. And then I just found my eyes opened up, and he was looking over me, and there's a beautiful black man, and the sun was behind his head. He looked angelic, and he was really smiling. And I'm thinking, all my thought was, wow, he looks so happy. How is Duck so happy? So he says, "Doc, are you going to breathe?" And I went, "Breathe, yeah, but what? Breathe that." And as soon as I tried to breathe in, everything just jammed right up. Just my throat closed and I went dark again. And then the next thing was this weird noise. The weirdness of it is what shook me awake. And it's like, and I realized, what is that noise? Where is it coming from? And I thought, wait a minute, it's coming from me. Oh, I'm breathing. And when I had that realization I was breathing, something in me relaxed and everything opened up and the breath started pouring into me. And I guess you could say I discovered the ecstatic nature of the breath because I wasn't breathing little bubbles of air, molecules of air. I was breathing bubbles of light, and they were bursting everywhere in me. It was orgasmic. It was ecstatic. And I had this full body experience of breathing. And when we did deep sea work and we breathed on helium, when you're coming back up at the 60-foot stop, they put 100%, they give you 100% oxygen. It's called an O2 bath. And that feeling from breathing helium, which is very cold, we try to put on, underwear and stuff in that deep sea rig, but it's an internal cold because the helium is so light compared to the nitrogen. And so you get accustomed to this kind of cold feeling in your cells when you're breathing helium. And then when at the 60-foot stop, they give you 100% O2. They give you that O2 bath, and the warmth that just starts to arise from inside out. It was just, I mean, never will you feel anything more amazing and wonderful. And big hairy chested guys going, it was just the most amazing feeling. So it was like, I don't know, for me, the breath has always been magical, miraculous, ecstatic. And so I just been obsessed with it.
So when was the first time you realized then, or was that the moment of the awakening for you? This is my purpose in life. This is my passion. And it suddenly took on its own career.
When I was earlier in training and, a whole bunch of us started out, they were hoping that, every day, like in the run, for example, if you're the last one in the run, you're out. That's it. They're just cutting people, weeding people in the early part. And we get down to 30. And then by the end of the training, there's 6 of us left. And so just kept, dropping out deliberately, trying to make you quit. And for me, it was like, all right, the harder they try to make me quit, the more impossible it's going to be, just out of sheer stubborn whatever, And so that I was starting to fall back. We were running, and that day they had this what they call the false peak experience, where we were running 3 miles every day, and then one day all of the trainers showed up, so we knew, oh, this isn't an ordinary day. And then they announced it. Okay, today we're running 10 miles. And they were looking at everybody, hoping if you went, oh, you were going to have a really bad day. They wanted to go, let's run 20, I think. And so, and we started. And then I started falling behind. I was experiencing guess what you would call performance degrading self-talk. I started to, oh, I don't know if I can make it. God, I'm getting so tired. I'm not the kind of things you want to be thinking and focusing on in those moments. And then one of the guys, Pete Kane, deliberately slowed down, and that really opened my heart in that moment. The fact that it's every man for himself. We're all just trying to survive and see who's gonna make it to the next day and not get kicked out. And but he slowed down on purpose. Says, "Doc, let's breathe in rhythm to our footsteps." And so we just started breathing together, and inhaling 2, exhale 2, or inhaling 3, exhale 3. We shifting back and forth, and it didn't take long before, man, I was flooded with energy. I mean, changed my focus, but the focus on the breathing just really made the difference. And then I just broke through. I was in the zone. I could run forever. And I was nipping at the heels of this guy, Youngblood, who was the lead runner, trainer. And I realized, okay, in those moments of stress when you don't think you can make it, you can't call your mother. You can't reach for a gun. You don't need the radio ain't gonna help you. You got to get a handle on your breath. If you're gonna make it, if you're gonna perform, if you're gonna manage your arousal or manage your emotional state or manage your mental state, the breath becomes it's where you redirect energy and attention away from what ain't working into the only thing that matters. And everything else just fell into place after that. So I learned, okay, this is the first, whenever I get triggered, upset, nervous, tired, anxious, I'm going to turn to my breath. I just learned that that's what you do. That's the only way through. And it just like sort of intuitively started building it in. And since I was performing so well, I ended up starting to train and teach others in controlling their breath and holding your breath longer. That comes in really handy. And so it just worked its way into my life out of sheer necessity.
So then at what point, and fascinating information, at what point did you then go, okay, it's time for me to go to another level outside your own learning? Because I know you done so much training in the Eastern, I'll call it medicine because I believe that breath is medicine. But then Stanislav Grof, you train with Qigong, all these different, um, I guess, ideologies coming together
Mhm.
and taking you to the top of the world. How did that evolve?
Well, I knew that breathing is life force energy, it's healing energy, it's creative energy. And there was no real training in it. So I just started. I remember in 1973, um, at the dining school in Washington, D.C., this doctor came from California, young guy, just came into the military. He was already a doctor, and he came into the military. And he had this book, Breathe Away Your Tensions by Bruno Gibo. And he was the original touchy-feely. He was from Austria. He was this sweet, happy little guy. He wrote Breathe Away Your Tensions. And so this doctor brought it to the diving unit. Just hey, anybody interested in this book? It was way too woo woo for everybody, but there was something about it that just turned me on. Here was like a systematic way of learning to play with your breath. First of all, just to release all of the tension and stress and stuff from your system. And wow, you perform better. All this stuff that's crap that's trapped in your nervous system and it's clogging your filters and, fear and pain and stuff trapped in the cells of your body. You're not flexible. You can't move. Your intuition sucks. And so I started to realize, wow, we can use the breath to purge out of our system all the things that are like, my understanding was it was clogging my antenna, trauma stored in the cells, physical tension blocking the circulation of energy flowing. So I started leaning in the Eastern direction, which, I'm in the Western world, started getting interested in yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and the Eastern studies, because that wasn't being taught, it wasn't being applied. But I realized, wow, we westernize some of these practices. We find the essence of them and strip away the Hindu religious part or the Taoist spiritual teachings and just what's working. And so I was pushing my limits. How long can I hold my breath? How much can I tolerate the symptoms of hyperventilation? I realized, for example, I was getting assigned to teams and people that I hadn't trained with. Once I graduated, I'm part of a special operations team. I was a medical person with demolition training. So I could blow you up and then sew you together, And so I was getting assigned to different teams and projects. And I just would come in for the job, and I hadn't trained with these guys. I don't know what are they gonna do when the shit hits the fan? Which way are they gonna lean? Who do I have to worry about? And I realized that when you push people to the end of their rope, and then that became my role, pushing guys to the edge of their rope to see how they perform under intense stress. And I realized that the people divided into two categories. You have the breath holders, the blue bloaters, and yeah, the hyperventilators, the pink puffers. And I realized I could separate everybody into a blue bloater or a pink puffer. And if they hyperventilated under stress, they were exactly the one who was running around like a chicken with their head cut off, yelling a bunch of stupid stuff and doing things that isn't helping anybody. And I knew ahead of time, okay, this I can predict this is where this guy's going to go wrong, out of balance. And the other one, the breath holders, they would freeze. And that was not my that was my default. I tended to move when I got triggered. I moved. I didn't freeze. And they were the ones who were holding their breath. And so I said, okay. So then I start testing them. Sure enough, everybody who holds their breath under stress, they're the ones who are going to be like, they're going to freeze. And the ones who hyperventilate, they're going to be the ones who I need to be a human straitjacket and tell them to shut up and be still. And the other ones I need to kick in the ass. You get a blanket. You get a rig. Give them something to do to get them moving. And so it became just a survival necessity for me. And I always, I was studying survival psychology, and the typical thing is the ship sinks. You get 10 guys in a life raft. 3 weeks later, they rescue. 8 of them are dead, or 7 of them are dead, and 3 of them are alive. Why did those 3 survive and the other 7 not make it? They're all in the same situation, all in the same circumstances, all have the same training. And so that the first few minutes after a catastrophe makes all the difference in the world. If you can get them moving, or if you can calm them down, you know, it's getting a handle on their arousal, or getting them to, getting a handle on their freeze response. And so it's just getting clearer and clearer. And you're going to balance your nervous system. That's why box breathing is used in the military now. I couldn't introduce it. They thought it was just a woo-woo, crazy stuff. And Mark Devine, Navy SEAL commander, finally introduced meditation, but he didn't call it meditation. He called it concentration training. He was teaching meditation. I was trying to teach meditation, but I was trying to call it meditation. I was the one weirdo out there that was studying yoga and Zen and everything among all these other guys that are going, this, Brulé's meditating on his belly button, weird, and getting laughed out of the room and stuff. But now it's organized and it's systemic. And that was, instead of meditate, he just changed I wish I would have known them sooner. You just change what you call it. And because they go, oh, meditation, meditation, yoga, schmoga, who needs that stuff? So instead of calling it meditation, he called it concentration training. And instead of calling it yoga, he called it somatic movement. Oh, that even sounds, like that's something our guys got to learn. So I wasn't successful in introducing it into the military, but it saved my life. And when I started working in big wave rescue, it was the same thing. There was no real training for it. You're in a washing machine, you're getting pounded on the bottom of the ocean, hoping that your bones don't break and waiting for a moment to the way you can come up in between waves and take a breath. And so we were deliberately practicing holding our breath till we couldn't hold our breath anymore and then forcing ourselves to hold it for 10 more seconds. And while we're spinning each other around in the waist deep water, elbowing and kneeing and kicking, and so you curl up in a ball. We're just, getting training for, chaos basically and breath holding. And so the rule was that when you can't hack it anymore, they call non-hackers, when you can't hack it anymore, then you uncurl yourself, and then that's a signal that they can stop beating the shit out of you. And the rule was when you think you can't make it anymore, count to 10 and then open up. And that's what I started doing, going longer and longer. And when you hold your breath, you create a whole package of feelings and sensations and emotions and reactions in your system. And if you can relax in the presence of those, if you can keep your center, you're going to heal, you're going to grow, something. And when you hyperventilate, you produce a completely different package of feelings and sensations and emotions and reactions and different things happening in the chemistry and in your mind. And if you can relax in the presence of those, then you're going to heal, you're going to grow, you're going to learn. And I was in that game pushing and pushing. But the problem is you don't know you've gone too far until you've gone too far. And I could see the writing on the wall with my addictive personality and my I'm gonna go for it until I'm dead, and that's all there is to it. I knew that's where I'd end up, so I extracted myself from that world because I could see the writing on the wall. I'd be down there, I would hold my breath too long, and that's it. They'd never see me again. I could see it. It was very clear where I was headed, and so I took the breathing training out of the water. That was like the big move for me, and then water training became an advanced practice. But let's just practice breathing exercise outside the water. Breath holding, hyperventilation, get accustomed to all those feelings and reactions in your body. And since breathing is the most powerful biological urge we have, if you can relax in the presence of that, relaxing into everything else is easy. If you can stay clear and calm when every cell in your body is screaming at you, everyday stuff seems to take on a whole different ease.
No, I mean, fascinating information. It's hard, though, I think, for people to grasp because one, we have the autonomic system that just breathes so we don't think about it. But when we get conscious of our breathing, it can become scary because we know it's life or death. In Born Superhuman, I have the 7 pillars of natural health in order of importance. And number one is oxygen. Right? The number one pillar that I have is oxygen. And people say, well, does that mean I have to go and get oxygen therapy? No, it's actually breathing. But I have a couple of questions in here for you. As you perfect or get better, I would say, with breath work and the way we breathe and the ability to change our breath into different physiological outcomes, is it better doing this in a hyperbaric chamber, for example, that gives us better oxygen? Does that feed the brain better? Does it feed our cells? And the other thing is, I'm sure people will be asking, is this ageless? In other words, you have a 5-year-old and a 95-year-old. Is there anybody that shouldn't be doing it? What's the best way to get the result?
Yeah, no, oh no, there's a lot of research around hyperbaric medicine chamber that pressure plays with the partial pressure of gases, oxygen, and CO2. So yeah, there's a lot to that. Um, But if you just think in terms of chemistry, carbon dioxide is a volatile acid and it's critical in maintaining pH. And in terms of delivering oxygen to the brain and to the cells, carbon dioxide is actually the primary gas that controls that. If the higher the level of CO2, the more the blood is willing to release the oxygen. So the blood traveling through low CO2 tissues, it's not going to stimulate the release of oxygen. By hyperventilating, for 60 seconds, you can reduce the supply of oxygen to your brain by rapid deep breathing. So it's counterintuitive. If you're hyperventilating, you're blowing off. You do that for a minute, and you can measure the loss of oxygen to the brain, which includes sugar and nutrients, everything else. Because as a CO2, as you're blowing off too much CO2, first of all, carbon dioxide is a vasodilator. So if you let the CO2 build up in your system, all your microvessels dilate, the bronchial vessels, blood vessels, and then the blood can leach into those tissues. If everything's constricted, the microvessels are constricted because of low CO2. I can't even accomplish the oxygen delivery to the brain or to the cells. I have to tolerate high CO2 levels, and the higher the CO2 level, the more the hemoglobin is prompted to release the oxygen. So it's it's getting comfortable with high levels of CO2 that relieves asthma, that relieves panic, and that sets the stage for the delivery of blood and oxygen to the brain. So there's a lot of hype out there about deep breathing. You're going to super oxygenate your cells. Most people, you have that little red infrared, O2 sensor. Most people's blood level is saturated with oxygen, 97, 98%. What's a little more huffing and puffing going to do? It's actually going to lower that, not raise it. And so some of it's just chemistry. And that's why if you're not controlling your breathing, your chemistry can go out of whack. And so you get a handle on your breathing so that you can actually, support the process instead of get in the way of it.
So this is something that I think people would love. We've all been around somebody that's had a panic attack or they've gone into some sort of hyper, breathing reaction. What's the best way for someone to calm down someone else? What would you say? Tell them to do this.
You know, in the cycle of breath, fear lives up to me, in my experience, fear lives up at the top of the inhale. So it's like, "Uh, and the breath gets jammed up there. And so those people, you need to relax, exhale, come down. Somebody who's angry is down the bottom of the exhale. You know, and you're going, hey, lighten up, breathe in. So even with emotions, you can see which way the person is out of balance. And and we don't realize with bad breathing habits, we're constantly creating a physiological chemical imbalance between carbon dioxide and oxygen. And so when you hold your breath, it's not the lack of oxygen that feels uncomfortable. It's the rising level of carbon dioxide. And you can get so if I hold my breath, two things start to happen. CO2 starts to build up and oxygen in my system starts to go down. And so what I'm responding to is the raising of the CO2 level. That's what creates the panic. I need to breathe. I need to breathe. And so you literally just train in tolerating that feeling of air hunger. And so you can get so good at that that the CO2, you're fighting it, you're able to manage it. Meanwhile, the oxygen level is going down, and at some point the lights just go out. There's no warning, nothing. Shallow water blackout. Very, in the early days, especially when we were hyperventilating on oxygen before doing a deep breath hold, people were blacking out. Shallow water blackout. And so you get so good at fighting off the symptoms of high CO2 that the low O2, it's just like just the lights go out. There's no warning. You don't feel it coming. You just boop. That's it. And if you're underwater when that happens, and it's actually your skill at breath holding that killed you. And no, and so there's a certain, and now now they've back in 1970 when I was started, everybody was just hacking on their own. There was no real organized system of training. There was no the understanding. Now we understand that. So, for example, hyperventilating on oxygen has been eliminated in free diving and so on, breath holding
So,
competitions.
yeah, with hyperventilating, we were always taught give someone a brown paper bag and breathe into the bag in and out.
Yeah. And that raises their CO2 level. And that what causes the dilation of the bronchial vessels and the microvessels, and you tip the system away from this, panic, emergency anxiety thing. So, yeah, getting comfortable with the feelings of air hunger gradually, gently, getting more and more comfortable, and that allows your pH to remain in the normal zone, and you're not pushing yourself out of it. And a lot of people don't realize that anxiety, they're on the chronic, constant low level anxiety. They're just living with it all the time. And there's a test you can call the Bolt test. I think Patrick McEwen came up with it. You take in a normal breath in, normal breath out, and then hold your breath and time yourself and see how long you can go before you have the first little urge to breathe. And that's your Bolt score. And you should get sitting at rest, you should get that at least 30 seconds, 45 seconds. If you want to be a peak athlete, you should, sitting at rest, be able to tolerate a 60-second pause at the bottom of your exhale without experiencing any real powerful compulsion urge to breathe. That means you've cleared away a whole lot of stuff. And it doesn't matter what kind of performer you want to be, sports, athletics, business, you're responding to your inner anxiety, and so that's what you work with, and the breath is a perfect tool. It's a perfect gauge for getting, for doing that work, getting comfortable, so you're not pushed and pulled by fear and pain and whatever, and you can stay the course. And breathing is the way that you kind of stay the course.
So effectively, if somebody had anxiety and they're not in an anxious moment, right? They're in a calm moment, them practicing that breathing out, holding the breath and learning to be comfortable, would that then become a tool that as they begin to feel anxiety coming on, they could tap into that?
Yeah, anxiety is aliveness. And it's distressing feelings of aliveness, but it's feelings of aliveness nonetheless. The Harvard cognitive reframing, right? The Harvard University came up with this cognitive reframing. I feel anxious, anxiety. It's not connected to anything. I'm worried about what might come or whatever. And you out loud, you just say, "I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited." And that reframing, and if you do that when you're actually feeling anxiety, you'll feel a shift. And then you look at your breathing urges. Are you over breathing? Hyperventilation, you need to calm your breathing down. Are you holding your breath? You need to keep your breath moving. So you got to know that about yourself. Which way you go out of balance when you get to the end of your rope. And if you know that about yourself, you can guard against it and prepare and don't get knocked off balance.
You mentioned earlier box breathing. I know there's the breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5, hold for 5.
Yeah.
And I think, as I've heard you speak about, you said there's a lot of people that will go out there, they'll do one day of training, think they know everything about breath work, and then they're educating people about how they should breathe, but it may not be the actual system that person needs. Is
Yeah,
there, sorry, go ahead.
you can tell the difference between somebody who is embodied knowledge and somebody who's just, repeating something they heard. And so, we have to concepts get you nowhere, training get you everywhere. And so you just got to work and do the work, and every step kind of the next step naturally unfolds in front of you, and you be with persistent training, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, tolerating the intolerable, loving the unlovable. There's no way around it. Like when that's what it comes down to. So, practicing longer pauses after the exhale. As box breathing in particular, when you're doing box breathing, when you inhale, your heart speeds up. and you trigger the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. When you exhale, your heart slows down. You trigger the parasympathetic branch. So if you make your inhales and exhales equal, 4 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever, you're balancing your nervous system. So you're energized, but you're also calm. And you practice those pauses, and I would call them a pause rather than a hold, because when people practice breath holding, they tend to lock up their system. And that and the locking up of the system eats away your muscles are eating energy and so on. Better to practice an open pause or artificially block your nose and mouth so you can relax because it's more of an open pause. So I would say breathe in, 4 or 5, pause, 4 or 5, exhale, 4 or 5, pause. So it's like an open pause. And then you grow that box. 5, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, 6, 6, and you start playing with threshold training. Now anybody can do certain breathing exercises. Maybe they can take 4 or 5 or 10 breaths, or they can do it for 2 or 3 minutes. But then as you stay longer into the particular breathing practice, you realize that, I can do it. I can manage it, like very slow breathing, right? Yeah, maybe you can take a, 30-second inhale, 30-second exhale, 30-second. That's a 1 breath per minute. Now, but how many minutes can you do that, right? So you got to start to just work with your own inner reactions, and that's the power of breath work. It puts people in touch with the feelings and sensations that have the power to scare them or distract them or get in the way. And you find the weakest link in your chain. Hey, if the guy on the side of me can stretch his exhale out for 30 seconds and I can only do it for 10, what's my problem? So the breathing starts to reveal where the weakest links are in your chain, emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, chemically. And then you can start to grow your abilities. And the breath is the perfect gauge for just the progress that you're making.
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny here, Dan, from the point of view that if you go and meet someone at a party, 'cause I'm a dentist, you become conscious of your teeth straight away. I'm sitting here and I'm sure the listeners, I've become so conscious of my breathing listening to you right now because we're made aware of it. I've read that you said we have 23,040 breaths roughly a day. Is that correct?
Well, the average person, depending, but it's up there between 16 and 20 breaths a minute for the average person. Yeah. And there's something called the therapeutic zone. Get your breath down into the 4 to 8 breath range. That's a therapeutic zone. If you can slow your breathing down and train yourself that that's your default setting, that you're habitually a slow, deep breather rather than a rapid, chaotic breather, that gets reflected in personality and emotional tendencies, psychological tendencies. There's a direct link. Every emotional state has a corresponding breathing pattern or quality. Every psychological state, every physiological state has an associated breathing pattern, breathing quality, and every time your state changes, your breathing pattern changes. Well, the magic is it's a two-way street. If I change my breathing pattern, I can change my emotional state, my psychological state, my physiological state. And there are breathing patterns and qualities that are associated with very high states and extraordinary abilities, ecstatic, amazing, in the zone kind of states. And then there are breathing patterns that are associated with profound peace and relaxation. And when you identify those breathing patterns, you got a handle on, you can choose how you want to feel, using the levers of the breath. You can move in one direction. I can ramp myself up or I can calm myself down. And one of the things we teach, and a good thing for people to practice, is the breath awareness. Everything starts with awareness. Are you conscious of your breathing? And how conscious of you are of the details? What are the sensations? What muscles you use? Where is there constriction in the passages? And that's where I start everybody, because the more aware you become of your breath, the more you're going to get from any breathing exercise or technique that you practice. So, as I teach, there are two main aspects: breath awareness, just being a witness. Notice how you're breathing when you're stuck in traffic. Notice how you're breathing when you're about to get on stage and you got a performance or an important presentation? How are you breathing when you're in a dentist chair? How are you breathing when you're listening to music? How are you breathing when you're trying to solve a math problem? Most people would not become aware of their breath in those times. But if you do, you're going to make connections that are going to help you do better math and perform better. So that ability to observe my breathing, start to notice my own breathing habits and patterns, and and tuning into the experience of breathing. So it takes a certain meditative awareness, and that's where I would start everybody. Because the more aware you are of your breath, the more aware you are of your posture, your reactions, your moods, the more conscious you are of your breathing, the more conscious you are of your posture, your environment. And so that's the first step. And if anybody, that's where we start. Let's tune into the sensations of the breathing. Let's follow the path that the breath takes. What are the tip of the nose, bridge of the nose, skull and sinuses, in the throat, up under the collarbones, around the heart, down into the belly. Where does the breath go? What does it touch? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it chaotic? Is it rhythmic? Is it easy to inhale and difficult to exhale? Or is it easy to exhale and difficult to inhale? And what muscles are you using? And so you gotta wake up. You gotta get conscious. You got to develop interoception. You got to be willing to look at how you're thinking and how you're feeling and how you're reacting in different moments. And the breath gets to be, it's like the canary in the coal mine. If I get a handle on my breath, I get a handle on everything else. And so that's where I start everybody. We start with breathing meditation. Don't even have to breathe in any special way. Just tune into the breath, let it come and go by itself, and start to explore the details. And there are points in the breathing that you've never observed. And some of those points are like a key, like a doorway to a new consciousness, a new reality, another level of performance, but they're very subtle. And so we have to develop this subtle awareness of our breathing habits, and then we can start to adjust them and send them in the right direction.
Brilliant. I was just thinking as you're talking, there's so much information you're giving right now, and it's such simple information, and yet, if we haven't thought of it, it seems not. It's not confusing at all. I was thinking before I go on stage every night with Lloyd Webber, if I was excited, I just thought my breathing changes. But if I go into a dentist chair and I'm nervous, it just made me right now aware that my emotions govern my breathing. And what you're saying is we can turn around by controlling our breathing, that we don't become emotional in a car when someone cuts us off. And I've been guilty of that at least once in my life. I'll leave it there. But but as I become aware of the moment, I also can begin to govern my own happiness, stress levels. So number one for me is oxygen in the levels. Number seven for me is challenges. This is the seven pillars of health. If we don't challenge ourselves, the body through positive stress doesn't change. And what you've talked about today is the brilliance of the body's ability to be able to adapt and take on what we challenge it to do.
Mhm. Yeah,
Go ahead.
if we stay in our comfort zone, we're never going to grow. But if you get too far out of your comfort zone too much too fast, your system is going to sabotage and get in the way and block you. So so I have this model. I draw a little circle, call that the comfort zone, and then draw a bigger circle around it, call it discomfort. And then you draw a circle in the middle, and I call that the working zone. So you don't have to push yourself through your fears, but you got to lean into them. And so you can use breathing to do that. Just create stress and discomfort in your body with breathing, and then practice relaxing in the presence of that stress. And you can actually regulate how much you can grow. And pretty soon you're comfortable in places where your comfort zone used to be here, and now your comfort zone's out here. And so we grow our comfort zone. And that's training, right? That's what you're talking about. It's training. It's not going to happen by itself. You got to add little by little, get better and better. The consistency, daily practice. I don't know how, I don't know any way around a daily practice. I'm a lazy bugger. If there was, I'd be doing it. But, a daily breathing practice is so important. Keep the flexibility in your breathing. Can you breathe fast? Can you breathe slow? Can you breathe high in your chest? Can you breathe low in your belly? Can you breathe through your nose? Can you breathe through your mouth? And just in playing with all the parameters of breathing, because I found that if nothing can disturb my breath, nothing can disturb me. And as long as something has the power to disturb my breathing, I'm now the victim of my own whatever, you know? And breathing is a way I get a handle on that whatever.
I guess it's a way of saying if you're going to be doing it, you might as well do it right because you're going to be breathing anyway. Practice, do it right. I don't know if you know Dr. Porter with Brain Tap, but he turned around and he said, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. And so if whatever you do is going to have a direct impact on you.
Yeah.
And I'd love the idea of, again, daily practice because that will become your habit. Let's go on, because I got a question. When I was singing on stage, we were always taught to sing through our nose. But in very high activity stage runs, sometimes it was hard to get enough breath in to sing 8 bars without taking, or 4 bars without taking a breath or something. So I used to go out with a backpack on, put my headphones on. I'd run with 50 pounds. My costume weighed up to 50 pounds. I'd be running through the streets, singing, learning how to breathe. But they always said, breathe through your nose. Sometimes I couldn't get enough. What is the difference between nose breathing, mouth breathing, and then is there combo breathing as well?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, we're meant to breathe through the nose. And racehorses, one of the most powerful runners on the planet. If they're breathing through their mouth, it's because they're dying. And so and what was his name? John Duyard, chiropractor, body, mind, a breath. What the heck was the name of his book? Anyways, a chiropractor, he's training athletes to breathe through their nose. And, as you say, once you get going, it's like the nose isn't enough to give you all the energy you need. And so there's the practice right there. Try as you start your training and you're breathing through your nose and you get to that point where it's getting really difficult to keep breathing through your nose and you want to break into mouth breathing, don't ease off just enough so you can continue to perform with nose breathing. Your performance level is going to go way down, but only for a couple of weeks. And you're going to end up back at the same performance level, but you're going to be breathing through your nose instead of your mouth. There's a lot of wear and tear happens on the respiratory system with habitual mouth breathing. Public speakers turn into unconscious mouth breathers. Blah 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 blah. And without realizing, they're becoming unconscious mouth breathers, which starts to screw with their chemistry and they start having stage fright. I've worked with musicians, Boston Symphony Orchestra, clarinet player. He's been playing for 20 years. All of a sudden he starts getting stage anxiety and he can't catch his breath when he's playing. What the hell's going on? His breathing habits were starting to, you know, chip away at his abilities. And so nose breathing is a great challenge. And you can, or breath holding while you're exercising, right? You just hold your breath and count your footsteps and just get better and better at going longer and longer without breathing. And that's going to, you're really going to expand your potential. So, and there's lots of training, resistance devices. There are a lot of these breathing resistance devices. Aerofit. I might become a spokesperson for them. I don't know, but um, you know, you exercise your breathing muscles, and learning full yogic breathing is and so there's a lot of mechanical, muscular, structural coordination training you can do to make your breathing more efficient. You can increase your lung capacity with practice. Um, and if you do, everything else is going to benefit.
Yeah, I've been using Aerofit actually, so I know it very well. And because I race bikes, that's my passion. And before I get to that, because I do have a specific question that's selfish just for me, and who better to ask than you, Dan? But our cardiovascular system, our heart strength, is what delivers or pumps the blood around that carries the oxygen around our body. Does breath holding increase our cardiovascular ability? Does it strengthen the heart by holding the breath, or is there a direct correlation?
Well, essential hypertension, high blood pressure with no known cause. It's an epidemic in the world. That's caused by the lack of breathing at depth. So, breathing isn't just a respiratory function, it also serves a circulatory function. Your breathing is supposed to be supporting your heart in pumping blood and fluids around the body. So, if you're not breathing deeply, you're making your heart work twice as hard. And so, of course, your blood pressure goes up. And as soon as you practice slow diaphragmatic breathing, your blood pressure goes down, your heart rate goes down, because now you're supporting, the cardiopulmonary system, the heart, lungs. It's a relationship. And if you're relying on poor habits on the pulmonary side, your heart is having to work harder. So as soon as you start getting into the breathing, it relieves the heart of doing so much work. So pretty simple principle, the thoracic pump. Every time you fill your lungs with air, you're also the action of the diaphragm is flooding your lungs with blood. And so when you inhale, you can sense and start to feel the blood being drawn from your extremities into your core. And when you exhale, that Valsalva wave, the venous and arterial supply is being pumped in an inverse relationship to the inhale and exhale. And so breath control can really make a huge difference. Um, in fact, I don't know any high performer, 1%er. If you're the best weightlifter, you're the best runner, you're the best scientist, engineer, musician, do you breathe better than the average person? Do you turn to your breath when the average person, it wouldn't occur to them? Have you practiced breathing exercises? I don't find any exceptions. And if you've really gotten a high level and you haven't applied breath work, you think you've reached your highest level, you're gonna click up to the next level. If you haven't already incorporated breathing, then wow, you got something really cool waiting for you. And if you are practicing breathing, you can tweak it and adjust it. Like I'm here in Florida, I'm going to work with Tony Robbins. Now, he's done so much work on himself that a little tweak, a little adjustment, he can parlay that into a huge advantage. High performers, say the top 10 tennis players in the world, they're all so close at a skill level on any given day, anyone could beat anybody else. You got a little more sleep, you're a little more focused, whatever, that little extra edge, and you take the day. Well, breathing can be that little extra edge that makes all the difference.
They talk about stem cells. It's kind of like I don't want to say a fad word because we know stem cells are great, but it seems to be coming more to the front. We know fasting stimulates stem cell activation. Has it been discovered or tested whether breathing can actually activate stem cell production or activation?
I think there's some stuff out there. I haven't found anything specific, but there is some things going on. And the whole, DMT and production of different chemicals and stuff associated with various breathing exercises. Definitely there's something there. Wave, brain waves, and different breathing patterns put you in a completely different, state, brainwave state. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's something there, whether how much is confirmed and how much is being revealed. A lot of this research is being done by people who like to have an edge over everybody else, and they're not going to share the information because they're benefiting from it until everybody else figures it out. And so I, I had a good friend I still have, Peter Litchfield. He developed capnography. His brilliant, brilliant guy. It's all about CO2 and when 20 years ago, when he sent me his capnometer, he was developing the program and the software, and he asked me if I would play with it. And he started realizing that he would send it to NFL sports teams, military, and then they weren't sharing what they were learning because they go, aha, this gives us an edge. We're not going to tell anybody else the training that we're doing and give away our edge. So I think that's happening in a lot of research. A lot of things are being worked out and discovered, but we're not going to hear about them until they're on to something else. So I'm sure that there's a connection. I haven't followed it. I don't know where the research is at, but intuitively and in my gut and just logically, of course it's going to make a difference. Of course.
Yeah, for me, logic makes a big difference as well because we're so busy looking for the next secret, and yet often the magic is in the work we're just avoiding rather than going back to basics and understanding.
Oh yeah.
Okay, myself.
And even the greatest musicians practice the scales before they perform. And this principle of going back to the basics, I mean, and what's more basic than breathing? It's the quintessential, it's like it's a perfect example of something that's very basic, very simple, right under your nose. Why go any further? Why look any further and overlook the most obvious thing? The simplest things always turn out to be the most powerful. The most basic things always turn out to be the most important. So breathing is we got to keep coming back, and I find the more I keep coming back in my own practice, the higher I get, the faster I go, the further I go by coming back to the basics.
That's where Born Superhuman comes in because the very first moment of independence, when that umbilical cord is cut, where we take on our own existence, is that first breath and everything starts feeding. And why did we move away, or why have we been dumbed down or numbed down from that moment of independent brilliance? We're not born perfect, but we're born superhuman to take on anything.
We lose a lot of that. We disconnect from it. When I first started, when I found this form called rebirthing breathwork, I was already out of the military. I was at University of Massachusetts. I had been practicing box breathing, breath holding. I had been working with symptoms of hyperventilation and testing myself and pushing other people. And when I got out of the military, I discovered rebirthing breathwork, and the idea behind it was that, yeah, when you're in the womb, all the energy you get comes through the umbilical cord and you don't have to do anything. But when you're born, all these systems come online at the same time, digestive, endocrine, and it's like, you know, we fry some circuits, we short circuit. In that first breath, we don't have a chance to just play with our breath and get used to it. And no, you got to breathe or die. And if they cut the cord and you haven't started breathing yet, then when you do take your first breath, and everybody goes, "Oh, isn't that wonderful?" It's like, "Where the hell am I? I'm at the end of my rope. I'm screaming." And that first breath is so painful. It's like fire. And so the next breath ain't going to be as big. And then every emotional shock, every physical shock, every psychological trauma puts an inhibition on our breathing. And it's like boiling a frog. I have a shock or a trauma and my breathing is totally blocked, and then I recover from that trauma, maybe 80%, 90%, but there's a residue, and it builds up in our system. And so I got into rebirthing. I'll tell you, the very first session I did, 5 years of PTSD and even my traumatic brain injury. I mean, I felt like a snake, like skin slipping off a snake. I was raw. My nervous system, the colors got brighter. I hadn't realized how all that tension had built up in my system and it was getting in the way because it snuck up gradually and you don't feel it. So if I have tension in my body and it's there all the time, I'm not even going to notice it. But that tension is interfering in the flow of my blood, my life force, my energy, my thinking, my cognitive abilities, my flexibility. And so for me, it just no matter where I turned, I saw breath was the answer. And that was it's and I'm still convinced. That's the first thing. That's the answer. So take care of that and see how much of your problems disappear before you try anything else.
No, that's brilliant. Again, if you don't agree with it, try not breathing. Stop.
Yeah.
And see what happens. So I know with fasting, for example, the experts is coming out and saying after 16 hours, we begin to start generating new stem cells. We start getting our, gut health begins after 18 hours. There's change 24 hours, and then it goes up, and the effect on the body, which even can go by their claims, and I'm not an expert to turn around and say this, but actually curing cancer by depriving the cancer cells of fuel and actually use them. But with breath work, is there a certain physiological effect by if I hold my breath for 30 seconds, I hold my breath for 1 minute. At what point do the changes happen?
Yeah. You know, everyone is so unique. Um, you get if I take a peak athlete, I mean, I work with guys in the military, and they don't come in any better condition. You push them to the edge of their rope. Now, it's going to take a lot longer to get them to that point than, say, an old, frail lady in bed. She's going to reach that point much quicker, much sooner. But you know what? When she gets to that point, she often does better than the big, macho athlete, because that woman's learned how to surrender, learned how to relax, and they're not trying to fight everything. At some point, it don't matter how hard you fight, relaxation is just going to get you through. At some point, it doesn't matter how much you can huff and puff, holding your breath is the way. So, breath holding is very useful, and I teach it right alongside of hyperventilation. So if I get comfortable with all the symptoms of hyperventilation and I deliberately stir them up, trigger hyperventilation, and then get comfortable with it, relax in the presence of it, I'm going to heal. I'm going to grow. And if I practice breath holding, I'm going to produce a different package of feelings and sensations and reactions. And if I can get comfortable in the presence of those, I'm going to heal something. I'm going to grow. It's why Wim Hof is so popular. Most people in the fitness world by now have heard of Wim Hof. What's his practice? Hyperventilation, breath holding. Hyperventilation, breath holding. And so you're getting comfortable with both. And so, of course, you're going to expand your comfort zone and your abilities. And you're not functioning in a little narrow thing. Some people, if they breathe too much, or if they hold their breath a little too long. And so if you just grow in those two directions, you get more and more comfortable with hyperventilation and more comfortable with breath holding. You're getting more and more comfortable with the whole range of things that can stop us, bog us down, get in the way, cause us to fail.
So this brings me to my selfish need. I race bikes. I was out on a climb yesterday. I'm not a climber, I'm a sprinter. I'm built very different. When I'm redlining going up a climb and know that if I don't stay there for sometimes 20, 30 minutes redlining it, and yet I'm gasping for breath, it's hot, I don't do well in heat personally, I won't even be there close to use my sprinting ability. As I get to the point where I know that I'm now, my VO2 max is hit, my lactic threshold is beginning to saying your muscles are shutting down. What is the best breath while I'm continuing to work? Or what's the best practice, I should say, of breath that would allow me to continue to function at the highest level that I possibly can and not get into that just,
I'd have to observe each person because we start with structural, muscular kind of patterns, mechanical issues with your breathing. And that's on a very dense, basic level. If you're using a lot of muscles to breathe and you're getting certain energy from the breath, how much is it costing you to breathe versus how much energy you're getting from the breath? So I call that the energy to effort ratio. So if I see you huffing and puffing, I can zero in on, man, relax your neck muscles, those aren't shoulder muscles. So I might even before, if you, anybody, if you squeeze these muscles in the back of your neck and these muscles on your shoulders, and then practice breathing really deep, really fast, really hard, and make sure nothing happens in those muscles, like accessory muscle use. Peel that away. It's not until you're really at the end of your rope that all these accessory muscles should come in and start supporting you. But you don't want them in the process right from the very first breath. You want it to be more efficient, more economical. So I would look at the mechanics and the structure. There was a guy, Carl Stowe, I studied with in New York back in the early 80s. And he had a beautiful model for the breath as a ball and socket joint. The socket is the rib cage. I mean, the ball is the diaphragm, and the socket is the rib cage. And you know that side stitch that people get when they're running? That's the diaphragm rubbing on the floating ribs. And it's because the diaphragm isn't getting up there in the chest under the rib cage where it belongs, and it's down here running. So you think you need to breathe in more, but you really need to exhale more to allow that diaphragm to come back up where it belongs, and then the breathing is much more efficient. And so we used to use Carl Stowe used a counting technique. He just breathing through the nose and then count out loud 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. And he'd be checking muscles, watching, massaging, doing body work, and he'd help people come into what he called breathing coordination. People aren't using artificial muscles, then out of sync and discoordinated because they have these unconscious breathing habits. And if I'm breathing in, I don't want to be tensing muscles at the same time. I want to be able to receive that energy. So I think at this point, at that level, the question isn't how do I get better on the physiological level? At that point, it becomes mindset. It becomes spiritual, right? There's energy within the breath within the breath. We're talking prana, chi, life force, spirit, pure will, power, determination. And that, for me, that's the cool thing about breathing. How do I access that kind of abilities? It'll get me through and get me over. But you'd have to actually measure CO2 in order to give good advice on what to do in that point. And that's why Peter Litchfield and his whole approach of mindful physiology, you might be practicing a yogic breathing technique and you think you're producing a certain benefit, but when you measure CO2 in real time, you find that you're not helping yourself. You might need to breathe less, not breathe more. You might need to shift the breathing down into your belly and out of your chest, or you might need to breathe into your chest. And so everybody is so different. We've picked up unconscious breathing habits and patterns, and we don't even recognize we're doing them. And sometimes it takes an external coach to point out something that's very obvious. It's easy for you to see from the outside, but the other person is so ingrained in their habits, they don't even know what they're doing. So that question you asked, there are some general rules, but damn it, there's the 80-20 rule. I mean, you might be part of that 20% that you don't go. You need a different intervention. I work with Oren Klaff, who is just handling, anxieties really good in the room with the CEO, the CFO, the analyst. You got 15 minutes and you need to walk out with a check for 10 million bucks. This is the guy. But put him in front of 20,000 people on stage. He's way out of his comfort zone. And he go, maybe it's damn, my voice went up 2 octaves, yeah. And so one of the anti-anxiety breathing is low and slow, right? Breathe low into your belly and slow your breathing down. But that wasn't working for him. So we devised a different technique. Let's ramp up your breathing, meet your anxiety level, like lassoing a wild horse. First you get a handle on it and then you can rein it in. So the common advice, breathe low into your belly and breathe slow, it wasn't working for him. He had to do the opposite. He had to ramp his breath up, get up high in his chest until he was meeting the anxiety at the level he was at, and then he could slow his breathing down. So, you got to look at your unconscious habits and patterns, which way you go. I call this energy to effort ratio. How much is it costing you to breathe? Are you wasting a lot of energy to breathe? Well, make your breathing more efficient and infusing every cell with breath energy. That's an amazing practice. People don't get it. It's more of a meditation. You imagine breathing into every cell of your body, not just in your lungs. And that little psychological sort of little trick unlocks some potential. So everything to me has got to be a spirit, mind, body approach. And that's when you get up to those high levels and you're looking for the next breakthrough. One of those, you got to turn more to your spirit, do something in your body, work on relaxation. If I relax, something opens, and it doesn't take a lot of effort, to do anything. If I'm soft, like I live down, it's relaxation is the key. But so I live in Mexico where we have hard-packed, mineral-rich soil down in the Baja. And when it rains, the water just washes along the surface looking for the ocean. But if you turn the soil, if you loosen the soil, soften the soil, then when it rains, the soil drinks up the water. Same thing with relaxation and breathing. If you're not incorporating relaxation into your breath work. You might huff and puff and get a lot of air, but the energy is not going to penetrate you. The prana, the chi, the ki, the energy. And so um, some of it gets to be, it's not just about CO2 and mechanics and anatomy, is something more subtle that, especially when you get to those high levels, the little subtle adjustments and make all the difference.
Yeah, again, I've used the word fascinating with you numbers of times today. And I know Oren Claff, he's a great guy. For people that don't know him, he's a very high performer. And he's dealing, like you say, with millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars. And for him to realize that to go to the next level when people would perceive that as such a high level goes to show what's in there. And I love the fact, Dan, that you're talking about there is no one size fits all. There's a basis, and yet each person's destination that they're seeing as their goal will need a unique path. There's a saying that I love: if the path ahead seems easy, it's because you're on somebody else's. I love that. We have to go through our own work to forge our own destination. It's a science.
And we need inspiration for that. We need intuition for that. We need energy for that. We need to be in a beautiful state for that. And breathing is a way that's how it is. You can use your breathing to put yourself into states to relax more, to energize yourself. And I'm a missionary for the breath. And if somebody comes to me and they don't think there's a way of applying breath work to improve or make a difference, you just challenge me. We'll find a way. We'll find a way.
The number one thing that I have as a takeaway today is that people need to connect with you personally. I know you have courses online. I know that you've got ways to have that start. I love the fact, because one of my questions I was going to say is, what is one breath practice that everybody could do? But you've almost partly answered that by saying it's the awareness of your breath. It's the meditation of understanding, feeling your breath. Is there one maybe breath exercise that people could use to become more aware and gain a form of control?
Yeah. A sigh of relief. I mean, it's not even a technique. It's not even an exercise. A sigh of relief. That is an inhale that's twice as big as normal. So, and you create an extra stretch, a little extra expansion, and that's what triggers what we experience as a sigh of relief. So, play with the sigh of relief. Take an inhale that's twice as big as normal. Feel that extra stretch. And then when you release the breath, release a joint, release a muscle group. So you're energizing and relaxing, energizing and relaxing. And that combination of peace and power, of energy and relaxation, puts us into a really cool zone of flow. So start with the inhale. How long can you breathe in slow and feel side to side expansion, front to back, top to bottom? And then when you release the exhale, oh, wow, exaggerate it. Let go of a thought. Let go of a point of view. Um, and when you're breathing in, take your time like you're drinking very expensive wine. You're not going to just gulp it. You want to savor every drop. You got to get more intimate with your own breathing and start to get more efficiency and economy and balance and strength. And it's like developing any other system or any other part of us. It's training gets you everywhere. Concepts get you nowhere. And find the weak link in your chain, right? So hyperventilate and see where you start to feel stress. And now you know where you need to pay attention, what you need to relax, what you need to be more conscious of. And then hold your breath and hold your breath until you feel where in your body, what do you need to deal with? And then start relaxing into that and playing with it. And you're going to meet your own limitations and and a good coach can help, of course. But yeah, because I have online courses, a lot of free stuff. I I I hesitated to get involved in online breathing sessions, but when I finally did, I was very pleased that you can actually accomplish a lot and you don't have to be in hands-on in person. To me, that's still the best. I mean, I can make the most use out of a short time if I'm I can look at you and touch you and feel you and listen to you and watch you and play with you than just online where I have to kind of hope and guess and maybe watch. So, but you don't need hands-on training to really make a lot of practice, a lot of progress. At some point, you'll want to make use of a coach, but there's a lot you can do on your own as long as you identify the fundamentals and don't start doing something you're going to need to unlearn later in order to go further. So, basic physiology, basic anatomy, structures, you get that stuff down, and then at least you got a good foundation. You can go really far. I taught myself to play guitar when I was a kid, and nobody told me how to hold my hand. And when I decided to go for lessons, I had to change everything about how I was holding the guitar. And it was too much. It was uncomfortable. And so I quit. Oh, I'm happy enough. I can play some chords. I'm in a rock and roll band. I've learned good enough, but I can never become a really great guitar player because I would have to go back to the beginning and go through that discomfort again, and nobody wants to do that because, oh, it's working enough. It's good enough. So breathing is like that. We take on certain breathing habits and patterns, and it's enough to get us by. One of my favorite things to say is most people's breathing is like the pilot light in an oven. It'll keep you alive, but you can't cook anything with it. And so you gotta be able to ramp up your breathing and then see what's involved in that and how much is wasted energy and how much is efficient. And now you can start to refine your practice and really make some progress. And you start with any exercise. People ask me if there's only one breathing exercise I can do, what is it? A sigh of relief, because it's not even a technique. Just do it more consciously, exaggerate it, play with it, do it fast, do it slow, and just use it as a technique. It's not a technique, but when you do it consciously, you can do it as a technique, right? And you can make it into a really powerful thing. But identify the basics, awareness. You got to be conscious of what you're doing. You got to be able to relax, and you have to be able to not just breathe air, but breathe energy. And that's, then "Ooh, we're getting into the martial arts and, the whole philosophy around chi and spirit and energy and life force and the ruach neshemet, the breath within the breath, the energy within the breath. Anybody can huff and puff and move a lot of air, but can you breathe energy? And that's where then now whole new levels and dimensions come into breath work.
I personally recommend huge people getting into breath work because it's the essence of your life. Like I say, you take away your oxygen, you're gone. How can you maximize, which is exactly what you're saying, Dan, here, is how do I maximize the oxygen for every aspect of my life?
Yeah.
Very quickly, take someone through, if they were to sign up for a course with you online, and then if they want to go to another level, they then reach out to you personally. But take us through very quickly, just a basic course. What's the length of time per day? What's not the investment financially? What's the investment in time wise? And what's the results they could expect?
You know, I have my favorite practice formula is 10 plus 10 plus 10 times 2. 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, and then 10 times during the day for 2 minutes. And maybe you just make it a sigh of relief. Maybe you make it yawning. Or maybe you have a certain protocol, like I teach 20 connected breaths, 4 short breaths and a long. 20 connected breaths, or do some really active breathing, then a long inhale, a big sigh, and then pause at the bottom of the exhale. And then do active breathing again, and then do a long inhale, a big sigh, and do that still point. So you go back and forth like that. But start with any exercise, and it's going to lead you to the next one. You're going to start finding where your limits are. You're going to find out what you really like and you're good at. You double down on that. You find out what your limitations are and you try to gradually stretch them. Any breathing exercise is going to make you more conscious of what you're doing, more mindful. That's the best thing to practice. Any breathing exercise that allows you to vent tension, stress, to relax, that's going to be the best thing. And any breathing exercise that literally gives you energy. You feel that you can energize yourself with your breath. So if you can find one breathing technique that makes you more conscious, helps you relax, and gives you energy, that's the one you should practice. And and as soon as I can do it over line, I have people breathe, try this, try that, and I can see enough to give them something to focus on. And then you here practice this for a week, and then next week let's see how you did, and let's see what's next. And we start unpacking and unraveling everything until the breath is really functioning where it should be, where it ought to be, or where it could be. And we have this analogy of the mind, like the tip of the iceberg, and we're only using a small portion, and there's a submerged part. This is the same analogy is even more true about breathing. There's a lot that you can do in your breathing you're just oblivious to. And your unconscious habits and patterns are what take over in those moments and make the difference whether you can perform or not. So you have to train into your system certain resourceful patterns so that when you don't have time to think, your training kicks in and you lean in the right direction instead of going out of balance or whatever.
I have this program. It was called 60 Up. It's now Total Balance, where I've trained over 70,000 seniors to regain their balance and mobility, with breath being part of it. When you talk about the 10 times 10 times 10, and you're doing the two, we're sometimes, especially when we're younger, so busy rushing through life to gain our what we perceive to be our dream. And if I don't do this, I got to get it. And yet, as we begin to get to that point of retired, I can't stand the word retire because it means it rhymes with expire, and we don't want to expire. Imagine if I'm talking to my senior generation right now. You've got 20 minutes, you've got 40 minutes a day to invest that would bring back your health. And it's so worth it. I'm going to be signing up for your course, Dan, for sure. No,
Oh, great. And
and
my thing about retiring is don't retire, rewire.
I've got a course coming out which is called Reset, Rewire, Relive. So we're on the
There you
exact
go.
same page. We've just,
Right on.
changed that mindset to a reset and see what's the best memory should be ahead, not past. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm going to put all the links in here for you to connect to Dan's website, to connect to his courses, and how to find out, because it's fascinating, it's brilliant, and that's why it's my number one pillar of natural health. Two things to finish with, Dan. Is there one story that I know you've trained, like you said, over 300,000 people. I got something else I want to ask before we come to that. You were just working in a penitentiary, I believe,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
And we look at the state of the world right now with the impact of politics, of news, of negativity, of isolation coming out of COVID. And I'll tie this into the penitentiary. Breathing changes psychological, physiological, emotional states. Tell us about the work you're doing with the penitentiary, and what can the world learn from breath work to bring us back together again?
Yeah. Well, all of those guys have been traumatized and they've traumatized others. It's just so much trauma. And getting the nervous system out of that fight or flight, constant foot on the gas, and triggering the parasympathetic, getting them to really release some of that trauma is so important. And things just happen very naturally along the way. Manage their emotions, manage, if you take a breath instead of punching somebody in the face, your life is going to take a different course. If you can remember, just take a break, take a breath when you get triggered, and shut up and don't do anything. Come to your breath, vent that thing, get that on. Things, it's changing the culture. It's really quite beautiful. We work with a couple of death row inmates over there in Vacaville. They transferred from San Quentin when they closed the death row there. Former gang bangers, jacked up, tattoos on their face. Use the breath to get over your own trauma, and you're not traumatizing other people anymore. And I've been so inspired because some of those guys are really ready, willing to improve, to heal, to grow, to become better people. And they got plenty of time on their hands. And a lot of monks volunteer to go lock themselves in a cell and do deep work hey, you're in a perfect environment. And we worked with over 250 prisoners in that one prison. It's a medical facility. There's a hospice. There's a psychiatric unit. There's maximum, medium, minimum security all in one facility. And so it's changing the culture. The prison is pretty remarkable to watch these guys soften and open and heal and recover and start to love and serve each other and wanting to, when you breathe, you're playing with your heart. The lungs are wrapped around the heart. It's not an accident. And so once you start breathing, you're going to trigger some real healing, some real growth, some real transformation. And then it's just a matter of managing that growth and that transformation. So with good, you know, mindset skills, relaxation skills, changing beliefs and ideas, making better choices. The breathing creates a little space where you have a choice, where you used to just have a reaction, and that changes everything.
Would you say that's the same in maybe not as a focused attention, but I'm looking at the different angles between, and I'll say the extreme left and the extreme right, where people are just getting angry and we're losing relationships, we're losing friendships, we're losing the essence that used to make us happy.
Yeah.
The same ideology that if you begin to get triggered, just step back, take a breath. Don't let somebody else's opinion affect you because all it's doing is creating more turmoil in the washing machine of the world.
And when you're breathing, you're not doing what you usually would do in that moment. So there's a space for a choice. There's a space for something possible. Imagine two people fighting. And one person just goes, there it is. End of story. Interrupted the game. The whole life is going to take a completely different direction. All you did was you stopped and you took a breath before you said something or did something. And you become conscious that you've gotten triggered, irritated, aggravated, whatever. And since now you're practicing awareness, now instead of acting out externally, you do inner work. That benefits the world, you know?
So what we're saying is we should make this a mandatory program in schools for kids to learn it at a young age that they can then manage the rest of their life. If they could get that, it would
Oh,
like
give them those emotional regulation skills to upregulate yourself, downregulate. Oh, and it's happening, thank God. I was part of a 4 or 5 year program. We created a manual for school teachers and anybody working with, and it's age related and kids grade level related. So we have bunny breath and ninja breath and wood chopper breath and bicycle pump breath and kids like it. You get them playing with their breath and they start to see, wow, I can I can manage my arousal. I can blow off, something that somebody said. I can get a handle on my reactions. Oh, what a precious thing. And they're bringing it home and they're teaching their parents. So it's having an even wider effect. Kids are coming home and they say, Dad, take a breath, like, ta-da, the kids are our teachers.
yeah, I'm not sure I would have been brave enough as a kid to tell my dad to take a breath. That may have been exaggerated the thing, but no, it's great. And my girlfriend, she runs private schools, preschools, and educating the teachers on why a baby or a young child is getting anxious and what they could do, but also the teachers themselves when they're getting stressed out, how to find that calm in a tough position of emotion and need and effect. Is there one story that really stands out for you out of the so many people that was so life changing that it would inspire somebody listening to say, I want to take this step?
Yeah, I have so many miracle stories. I've been 50 years. Um, asthma, people with serious asthma, realizing that they don't need to take in more breath. They need to exhale more, control their exhale. Little change, put the exhale first. Most people, if you tell people take a breath, they breathe in and breathe out. And so if for a day, just turn it around and put the exhale first. Every time you think of breathing, exhale, then inhale. It's going to make you conscious of your breathing. It's going to wake you up. It's pretty cool. Just Spend a day putting the exhale first. Exhale, inhale versus inhale, exhale, and see what you start to deal with, and see the habits you bump into, and see, um, and we practice little, what I call different modes of breathing: active inhale, passive exhale. So do the inhale, let the exhale be a reflex. Do the exhale and let the inhale be a reflex. So active inhale, passive exhale, active exhale, passive inhale, and then active inhale, active exhale. So just playing with your breath in these ways, you're going to start to unravel and unpack a lot of stuff. And you're going to learn things about yourself. You're going to encounter your own limitations. You'll be able to retrain, change. If you can't change your breath, it's hard to change anything else about yourself. But if you change your breathing, that has a ripple effect on everything else. So I can use my breath and my body to heal my mind. I can use my breath and my mind to heal my body. I can use my mind, body, and breath to heal my emotions. And breath is the essential piece in the formula there. And so the better we are at that ability, the easier everything gets. So
Fascinating. Brilliant. This is the end, but not the end. It's the new beginning. I always like to finish, Dan. If you could say one thing to the world that will be your legacy for many, many generations to come, what is that one piece of advice, wisdom, knowledge that you would love to leave with?
make every breath a prayer, and experience every breath as a blessing. If you can do that, you're going to be living a life that people only dream about. If you acknowledge the fact that every breath, it's a blessing, it's a freaking miracle that you're alive, that you can think, that you can breathe, and start to appreciate just the fact that you can breathe, and attach a thought to every breath. So as I'm breathing in, I can be breathing in strength or courage or peace or patience or tolerance. And when I breathe out, I can be breathing out anger and resentment and confusion and ignorance. So, conscious breathing, make every breath a prayer. What kind of energy do I want to fill myself with? Focus on it when you're breathing in. What kind of energy do you want to put out into the world? Focus on it while you're breathing out. Be responsible for the energy you're taking in and the energy you're putting out, and use your breath to get more conscious of that, and start to appreciate the fact that you can think, that you can breathe, and you make it a love affair. Breath is it's our closest partner, and so get conscious of it, appreciate it, enjoy it, and then consciously and deliberately put intention into the breath. What's your highest spiritual thought? Uh, you know, link breathing with movement, link breathing with sound, link breathing with visualization. Get in the game of taking over this power, and it's right under our nose. It's the only system in the body, other than blinking maybe, that's completely automatic and completely under our control. That cannot be an accident of nature. That's not a coincidence. That's an opportunity. That's an invitation for us to take part in our own nature, in our own evolution. So just breathe. Play breathing games, and you're going to stumble over stuff, and it's going to motivate you to dig deeper and to study more.
I love it. Very rarely, Dan, will I ever not want to stop the recording, because I know as soon as I do, I'm going to suddenly have a plethora of more questions, because it's fantastic to know that something so simple and yet so ignored can bring so many different impacts to our life and those around us. So, Dan, I really appreciate your time. Everybody, we will drop all the links to be able to get hold of Dan, to be able to learn from the man himself. And thank you for gifting us your time.
My pleasure. I'm a missionary for the breath. You don't have to twist my arm.
Well, I might be calling you back and saying, Dan, come back on. I got another 50,000 questions. But we will see.
Pivoting.
Thanks so much.